Water History, episode 144, Thursday night. Richard, what's going on?
On the luminous feast day of one of the great martyrs of and fathers of the church, Saint Ignatius of Antioch.
Yeah, October 17th, recording this. What a great feast day.
Amazing, of course, because of the instruments of his martyrdom, that being wild beasts in Rome, and the extent to which he pled with the Christians in Rome not to intervene in his martyrdom, but that he might be leaven for his body and bones might be used to be leaven for the faith and as a witness to his indelible love for his Savior, who he knew died for him and his salvation, and then the extent to which he said that his bones would be the tools by which the lion's teeth might be sharpened. Um, Man, it makes you think, where is my love and devotion at? Where does it register? Does it even come upon that scale?
I am God's wheat and shall be ground by the teeth of wild animals.
Hmm.
Not too many people saying that today during these
No,
times.
no. But as we hasten more toward the end times, maybe we ought to be saying such things,
You think that's where we're
embracing
at?
penances, embracing penances and suffering, fasting to that end to prepare our souls for that. The signs of the times point to that, well, we're living toward that end, leaning toward that, hastening, as I said.
Yeah. Exciting episode last week.
Very much so. I was happy to be just a small part of the launch of what's sure to be not just a great series of products, but the culmination of so much hard work and effort, and that everyone will be blessed to enjoy a great Trinitine beer. It's great when you can combine something that's so naturally and in an orderly way pleasurable with something that is concomitantly prayerful and allows you or moves you to reflect on, in this case, when you're drinking a Mexican lager, about the courage of the Cristeros, which imitated the great saints of old, like Ignatius of Antioch.
Yeah. In Wisconsin right now, not in Illinois.
Soon.
I think I'm sticking to it. I haven't had any other beers. I know we didn't really adjust to it being in Wisconsin or Illinois, but it's in stores. So,
But we're going to be cheating soon because Trevor sent us some.
and I still saved a few.
You did.
I did because I
And
knew I was ready for the timeline a little bit.
and as we attended Porch Tour with Robbie, just this with Robbie Bernstein, who, by the way, people should be aware and be on the lookout for his upcoming comedy special, the first of his career coming out, Robbie Bernstein, the other half, better half maybe, of the Part of the Problem podcast, and the only person who runs the Run Your Mouth podcast. Um, and the Porch Tour series is putting out his special, or recording his special in Denver this weekend. So I did text him and wished him the best of luck, and he said thanks, bud, and talk to you later. So I know he's stoked for it, and I know the audience is going to be, well, the audience better be supportive because that's some golden material he throws out there for people.
Yeah. What do you want to talk about first?
This article from Ryan McMaken at the Mises Institute, which hits at the crux of what we do here. It's been a constant refrain in our work, whether it's the book or the podcast or the writing and blog entries that we do. It is just a not just confirmation, but an explication of the central theme and trope of this work and our endeavor here. And it's entitled "Why It's Not Enough to Hate the State." What a great title, riffing off of Murray Rothbard's famous exhortation that more of a prescription that you're a libertarian insofar as you hate the state. And McMaken's asking us to ponder and evaluate further whether that suffices. And his answer is an equivocal no. You have to do much more. Recognize its patterns, recognize its activities, recognize the state's modus operandi, which is always deleterious, and deconstructs that which is organic, voluntary, and ultimately constructive, operative within human society. And it's naturally evolving, emerging institutions.
Where do you want to take it? Any part stand out, or you want to
Yeah,
pull it up?
yeah, I'll read a couple excerpts from it, and the first of which that hits you like a ton of bricks when you're reading this piece, which you can find at, and we'll have a link to it in the show notes. But you can find it at on the Mises Wire and Mises Institute website. In the third paragraph, he says the decline of the what he calls the institutions that were born out of so-called bourgeois values, namely private property, local self-determination, and in spite of claims to the contrary, religious institutions. These institutions have long undergirded the ideas or ideals of what we call more generally liberalism. And today they're in an advanced state of decay, he writes. The decline of these institutions did not happen by accident, McMaken concludes. The power of the modern state is the result of long wars by the state, a type of longue durée campaign against independent churches, against family ties, and against local self-determination. This is the line that hit me right away, that so much so that I'm not a big highlighter, but I took out a highlighter this time and put some highlights in this. The state has never suffered rivals. So any organization that competes for the, end quote, hearts and minds of the population must be made impotent. So it doesn't take too much intellectual energy to be expended to conclude that the state is adversarial to those things that are organic or spring up naturally through voluntary, coordinated, and desired action within society. However, to understand that it's a war against these things, which range from religious institutions to private property and the exercise or direction thereof, and all the way down to the family, is something that is ever more, I think, evident, but is as it grows more evident, I would assert that people are all the more unwilling to admit of its existence. That is, say, the antipathy, or more so, the real visceral hatred that the state displays, active attacks and war that it wages against those things that are by their nature unable to be under its purview. And so it wants to absorb authorities in those realms. And you commented on several occasions in past episodes, whenever we talked about these matters, how politics has all these axioms and characteristics of religion. And the state wouldn't want that any other way. As McMaken expounds upon in this essay, the rituals, the sacramentals of the state, whether it's voting, in the case of the modern nation state with its charge of determining and measuring, and I wouldn't, no, not even saying measuring, it really be just determining and directing demographic trends. I mean, one of the sacramentals is obviously abortion in one of its rituals, which to me makes it quite clear that the state is a demonic institution.
Right.
If one of the central sacramentals, if you will, or sacraments. Let's just call it what it is, a type of binding oath in the traditional sense, and practice that's ritualized to show your allegiance to some entity is the slaughter of innocents in the womb. Well, as it clearly is for the state, then you got a demonic institution here. Whether it's of demonic origin, maybe is a different discussion, but it's certainly operative as a demonic institution today. Um,
I
there
want
are
to
other
read a
parts.
let me read a paragraph that
Yeah, please,
hit
that
me.
spoke to you.
This breaks my heart, but I think it's
Yeah.
true. Thanks to the decline of the family, it is even possible now to imagine that for many millions of
Mm.
Americans, their most meaningful and enduring relationships are with government agencies.
Yes. Right. Uh, and I saw that that was later on in the piece where he has these different sections in which he deduces or clarifies for us all the different entities that the state is at war with, right? Um, so much so that whereas he moves on toward the family, he quotes de Tocqueville and he says, so not 100 years ago, so this would be in the 16th and 17th centuries. This is de Tocqueville. Not 100 years ago, amongst the greater part of European nations, numerous private persons and corporations were sufficiently independent to administer justice, to raise and maintain troops, to levy taxes, and frequently even to make or interpret law. So this is a renunciation of the who's going to build the roads. That, from de Tocqueville's perspective, the emergence of and development of the liberal order that he was such a defender and champion for came about outside of the purview of the state. And that was the only way it could have, because it didn't require, in fact, not only did it not require coercion, if coercion was an element within any of those organic institutions, of those organically developing institutions, they would have never come to fruition. Or the best of those things, the best of those institutions, whether they be the law, uh, social organization and cooperation, self-defense, administration of justice, the formation of something like joint stock companies. All of these things were done outside of the purview, authority, and the power of the state, the capacity of the state. And what becomes clear within all of what McMaken says is whether we're talking about those institutions or the most, I suppose, sacred among them, and that's the family, is that the state sees a direct danger, a jeopardy to its existence and persistence, endurance, and ultimately it seeks to crush it. So he I love this. He has this paragraph too, which I thought was excellent. What I always prize about McMaken's work and what he always demanded, he was the editor of the Mises Wire. So when I would submit articles, which again you can find on my own works on Mises .com, Ryan was the editor, so I'd have to submit articles to him, and sometimes he'd say, "No, I'm not publishing that. We're not interested in that," or "There's another article on that." So he was very, what would be the word? Circumspect. He had a strong filter on what got onto that site, and it's of the highest quality, the Mises article entries, in my opinion. And in dialoguing with him, what I really treasure about his work and the works that the best authors submit to the Mises Wire is that they're very well sourced. And he is someone who follows his own criteria, set of criteria for what ought to be a good article on the site. So he quotes this economist, Anthony Mueller, and he says Anthony Mueller concludes that the welfare state established, in quote, a system of mutual obligation between the state and its citizens. This further solidified the idea that the state was to enjoy a, emphasis added, direct relationship with individuals, unimpeded by local, cultural, or religious institutional obstacles. It was this political need to, as one of Otto von Bismarck's advisors said, in quote, bind the people to the throne with chains of gratitude that led to the introduction of the welfare state. And with the welfare state, the behemoth that it grew into, to the extent that in the United States, this is a line that I'll just steal from Dave Smith, you have a an organist or a system of government founded upon the ostensible principle of limiting the power and influence of the state, that despite that stated objective has failed so miserably that there's no greater or more powerful institution with greater reach or destructive capabilities than that same United States government today. That doesn't happen by accident. It comes as a result of the state assuming, attacking private enterprise, private institutions, and then usurping or absorbing that power and authority and then acting in, albeit not very well, performing those roles. I mean, he has this section too. I mean, what I found interesting that he says right away, and it's evident to this day that as the United States government, the national government took a greater role in education and the propagandizing of American youth, it became imperative for the state to usher out and shoulder out, almost to the extent, although it tried in the past with Blaine amendments and the like, especially Catholic institutions that were a challenge, an alternative to the propaganda machine and indoctrination machine, the Bismarckian and Prussian model. He says, even worse, Catholic schools, which taught religious and cultural values and views that were regarded by the Protestant majority as even alien, were even more alien to that than those of the Lutherans. So the allegiance of Catholic schools, at least as they were taught by the initial religious who founded and then operated them, was not the same as the standard Catholic school today, which just seems to pine for imitating its local public school in many ways, and then but charge a lot of money to do so. These were distinctive countercultural institutions that, to their credit, to their undying credit, were seen as direct assaults to the nationalistic system and the centralized state.
I like how he refers to the private sector as anything that's not the government.
Right. Yes. Yeah, and
Because
that's
so much we just think that's business and corporations, and
mm-hmm.
the way it's used is we just think about it from, if it's not a business, then it doesn't really count under that category. But it truly is anything that's not that taxed, raised from taxation or funded by taxation.
Yes. It speaks to the the power of corruptibility. If the state and even its influences, indirect influences, are allowed to infiltrate, to insinuate themselves into any otherwise private institution, entity, practice, arena, then it's like a disease. It's tainted. You don't say that cow has a little smallpox, right? This virus spreads very quickly, and it demands the submission of the host. It really demands the submission of the host. Uh, as to what's to be done about that, he has this nice concluding paragraph. I do appreciate that he doesn't leave us hanging with this red pill of recognizing that it's just not enough to hate the state, but to act. And so he writes at the end, thus, if we are to meaningfully oppose state power and its assault, this is my word, these are my words, its assault against those institutions, particularly private, but the ultimate private institution, that's the family. It's necessary to encourage, grow, and sustain institutions, organizations over which states cannot so easily roll their enormous weight. When people support a local parish, raise a family, build a business, create mutual aid organizations, or foster local civic independence, they are doing work that is absolutely critical to fighting state power. While it is always good to speak ill of state power and to oppose its countless violent and impoverishing grifts, this is not enough. We must also speak well of non-state institutions and strengthen them in our daily work and daily lives. In other words, it's not just enough to fight the theoretical or verbal war of doing what's relatively easy. In other words, to be a libertarian, to be an anarcho-capitalist and point out the state's deficiencies is very much akin to Ben Shapiro going on a college campus and ridiculing the co-ed who knows nothing about world affairs, nothing about reproductive uh, activities or transgenderism, knows nothing about the psychology or the physiology questions regarding those things. Um, it's an easy task but notice that his effect, his lasting effect, it's not very lasting. It's ephemeral. What what can be done instead from the perspective of the anarcho-capitalist or simply that person who wishes to defend what Mises called and defended always as liberalism, basic ideologies of private property, uh, basic unalienable rights that ought to be enjoyed by each person by their very existence as a rational animal and human person, and all the things that go with that. Well, you have to be a defender of those very freedoms and those very things and entities that are constructed as a result of those rights and those patterns of organization's existence. A big part of this too is and this is why left libertarians just don't like the Mises Institute. They just don't like Rothbard and for that matter Mises and someone like Ron Paul is because all of those figures, Lou Rockwell included, would always argue that tradition is one of those institutions and what the left wants to constantly and deconstruct, whether it's in postmodernism or critical theory, and whether it's Marcuse or whoever's writing, and whether they're the part of the intelligentsia or whether they're just, you know, power hungry politicians who identify as leftists. They want to destroy those institutions, and they do so in such a surreptitious and sinister way. I mean, the other day, or what was it, last week, Kamala Harris reasserted that she's a capitalist. Joe Biden kept calling himself a capitalist throughout his tenure. I mean, well, I mean, that's really stretching the boundaries of what would be even remotely defined as a capitalist, and nor would any of those preceding figures um, that who I mentioned from Rothbard to Rockwell identify them as anything having to do with capitalism. But we have to, uh, it's a lot like what we struggle with, Charlie, when we're talking about, or at least you help liberate me from this practice of voting. Um, what, why am I engaged in a practice which, when you boil it down to the nuts and bolts and the fundamentals, is essentially me cooperating with or not eventually cooperating with if I'm on the losing side, but if I'm on the winning side of democracy, picking everybody's slave master. I mean, I don't want to engage in that, but could in order to um bring further joy, happiness, mirth, prosperity, build up and defend and even create institutions that by their nature are outside the scope of the state for for everyone's benefit. I mean, you do that as an entrepreneur. To do that in your work, to do that in your life is to, and this is going to sound a bit controversial, I think it's at the core of Christianity. I I I I don't think one can identify, at least from my reading of the gospel, nor one could identify by reading the entire corpus of Holy Written Scripture, any time in which God is working and calling upon his people to cooperate with some sort of construction and maintenance of an institution that requires people to be coercively enforced into submitting their freedoms and their rationality and their lives and their largesse, the fruits of their labor, uh, submission of their familial relationships to some entity. In fact, the Old Testament is kind of like the Israelites warring against such things,
Yeah.
and Christ doing the same thing throughout his life, and it cost him. I mean, obviously, he handed his life over of his own accord, as we know, but at the same time,
The way to get there was
yes, it was torturous
right.
and deadly, and fatal. Hmm.
Yeah.
But so I'm glad you enjoyed the piece. I thought you would definitely enjoy it because as I happened upon it and started reading it, I thought, oh gosh, this is what we do.
Well,
We
that's the
make
thing. I knew that it had some, I knew that it was right up our alley, but you made it even more right up our alley with that last part. So I didn't even, you're connecting some dots there that I didn't even have on my radar.
yeah. So and and I love how too, as we relate it to our own lives vis-a-vis Christianity and historical Christianity. I mean, you could just take any random episode. I mean, we could do the whole Augustinian route and just tolle legere. Let's just pick up and read the scripture, any episode within the Gospels, any episode within Paul, including Romans 13. Okay. And you could see, you could pick that up and be like, whoa, not only is Jesus essentially railing against the theory of submission to some outside entity, whether it be the Pharisees, the scribes, Herodians, the Romans, whatever it might be. He's not just speaking against them and being a rogue as a result and a rebel as a result, but he was a subversive in that he's building up all the things, individuality, the not in, of course, not individualism to the cost of communal good or common good, but he's re recognizing the good of the individual. He's constantly in defense of defending the family and marriage, right? There's not one institution that I see in which he's arguing for or supporting that would be working at all in concert with the state.
Yeah. Well,
Seems like someone should write a book about that, right?
yeah, right.
Oh, one day it'll come to fruition. I know. I'll have time at some point.
Yeah. What else do you want to talk about?
What else was on the doc? Oh, Marie Antoinette.
Right.
Yeah, so October 16th, just yesterday, was the anniversary of her death on the guillotine, October 16th, 1793. She ascended to the guillotine as a good and faithful Catholic and Queen of France. One of the probably truthful, albeit possibly apocryphal and hagiographical stories about her, was that on her way to the scaffold, rather than as she's depicted in a lot of really ahistorical movies, is that she didn't go screaming and kicking to the guillotine. She surrendered um, her soul to the savage revolutionaries at the time. And she apparently stepped on the foot of her executioner and she said, "Pardon me, I didn't mean to do that," something along those lines. So really the myth that has been built up about Marie Antoinette and her place within the revolution and the revolution itself, it has a lot to do with our McMaken's piece because, or the piece that we, or McMaken that we referenced earlier and analyzed earlier, because all of these diatribes and attacks against her, they're fallacious to an end. It's not just by accident that this occurs. It's not happenstance. They all support the narrative that the corruption of the monarchy was so complete and she was such a facet and played an enormous role in that corruption to the degradation of the French people that it was maybe the savagery of the revolution was taken out of hand, but in the end, she had to go, just as her husband had to go earlier, despite none of the vaunted institutions that the left so prizes, like the rule of law, should have taken place and played out. Uh, Long story short, she was really a tragic figure in that she was caught up as a foreign princess and then later queen who bore the brunt of all of these just insurmountable waves of animosity that were at points rightly directed toward the French state, the French absolutist state under the Bourbon kings, but were largely under her outside of her purview and control. She never said let them eat cake. That was something that was ascribed to her later by Rousseau. Uh, she never said that. She was known, and actually, upon becoming Princess Dauphine and then Queen, she was quite popular with the lower classes. And there was through these basically these pamphlets that were the equivalent of British tabloids, but in Paris, that all of these myths that she conspired to have affairs, she was accused of lesbianism because Germans always did that, according to the French. That she had multiple affairs, even with clergy members. None of this is historically accurate or true. These were all falsehoods that were directed and attacks directed at her so as to inspire hatred toward what she represented, and that was the old order, the ancien regime in France. So she's a tragic figure in that sense. People forget that her son had been tortured um, into uh, into saying, or not even admitting, but just kind of acquiescing to some of the claims that had been false accusations that had been made against her. I mean, and her husband was killed before this. Um, so she was quite beautiful from all accounts. She was charming. She had a elevated air about her. Um, and she didn't deserve to die, as it's quite clear that she was one of the tens of thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands when you count the war in the Vendée, of people who were savagely beaten, killed, tortured to the end of establishing liberty, equality, and fraternity. If those three transcendentals of modern government and modernism are so dependent upon murder and torture and injustice, well, then you might want to wonder what their foundations or what their fruits really are.
Yeah.
And she got it from both sides too. She was there's a great line from the French historian Pierre Goubert, who I'll which I'll always remember about how he characterized the French Revolution. And in my reading of the Revolution, which is extensive, as a French historian, you don't read a lot about the Revolution. You're not a French historian. It comes with the territory. But Pierre Goubert wrote, La Révolution a déclenché par la noblesse, which means the nobility unleashed the revolution. And because she had, that is to say, Marie Antoinette, because she had rivals among the court of the highest nobility, they attacked her and assailed her. And then those attacks and were used as propagandic hit pieces and means by which to get at her and her husband and the whole ancien regime setup. And they were really, well, what vivified them or gave them life were all of these tabloid-like things that were spread throughout Paris and its environs and throughout France to really encourage a visceral hatred of her as, and she was quickly painted as a foreign spy and all these things that she was never. She was admittedly trying to a be diplomatic to the benefit of her mother Maria Theresa and then her brother the who were respectively the Empress and then Emperor of Austria, her native land. But yeah, she's quite the tragic figure. She died in her late 30s as a mother of three, and she had just prior to the revolution lost her fourth child. So as an 11-month-old, but died a faithful Catholic with a non-juring priest receiving her last or giving her last rites.
Do you want to talk about a town where there aren't too many people that will die, faithful Catholics?
Yeah, we could talk about that town.
The people's favorite segment.
There it is.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
We go to your gay suburb now.
Meanwhile, in Oak Park, we've got a couple stories today. First one, what to know about election security and fraud prevention. The Cook County Clerk's Office. The Cook County Clerk's Office provides crucial information to voters.
You know, the Cook County Office of anything is going to provide a lot of crucial information to voters. Yeah.
In the United States, there's a common concern among voters about election security and the integrity of the voting process.
Why, Charlie?
It's important to have the facts from a reliable source to trust in transparency of elections and to ensure your vote counts.
This is already great. Did you see that clip of that guy who, I don't know if he's the Undersecretary of State of Pennsylvania, and he was asked, does voting fraud take place? And he says, no, of course, widespread voting fraud doesn't take place. Does he qualifies with widespread?
Widespread.
And the proof of that is that there are serious penalties for engaging in, vote fraud. I was like, oh, wait a second. This guy's basic case for why there's not any systematic corruption of the vote and its totaling is because, one, it's not widespread. That's not the question. Okay. Does it happen? And then two, it doesn't, they never got into the interviewer. It was pretty dumb. Didn't ask him the necessary follow-up questions like, well, how do you define by widespread? And then would it cause a different outcome in any election? Obviously it would, depending on what the scope of widespread is. And then secondly, that there are laws against it means it doesn't happen, which is categorically stupid.
Yeah.
Right? So it always makes me laugh. There are laws against jaywalking. So of course, no one jaywalks. Or
Right.
there are obviously a lot of municipal laws and state laws against speeding. And thank God no one goes a mile per hour over the speed limit. So
According to a NPR PBS News Marist poll published in October, 58% of Americans say they are very concerned that voter fraud will occur in the 2024 election. So how can their concerns be assuaged? With accurate information.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
The Cook County Clerk's
The
Office.
information- how does information stop it from happening? Again, this is a great case in point about, remember we talked about on the left, intentionality is everything.
Right.
It's as if they're all Samantha on Bewitched. If as long as they can, shake their nose and they intend that something happens, it happens. It doesn't work that way.
It's going to get real religious in a second here. Hold
oh
on.
boy, here we go.
The Cook County Clerk's Office is one such reliable source that works on a local level to protect democracy by securing a fair election and preventing fraud. Edmund Michalowski, Deputy Clerk of the Elections Division in the Cook County Clerk's Office, said people need to have faith that an election is fair and free.
This is something.
Quote, you have to come to a trusted source, Michalowski said. Election-related information is really a lot for people to take in. They just need to take a deep breath and understand that the Cook County Clerk's Elections Department is here to help them.
We're here. We're the authorities. We have it under control. Just look the other way. We'll tell you when there's a problem.
How does the Cook County Clerk's Office keep voters' data secure?
Why are you even asking that? We got it. We have it handled.
The Elections Division in the Cook County Clerk's Office has experts in election operations, logistics, cybersecurity, and information technology. According to its website, there has never been a successful legal case taken against the division or its employees alleging fraud. The clerk's office also has a cybersecurity group whose duty is to protect its networks, machinery, software, and data. The office uses analytics and authentication software to detect and block artificial intelligence, as well as preventing breaches. Threats from third parties around the world to come in and are more common with contentious presidential elections, Michalowski said. But if there ever is an issue with the technology or a cybersecurity concern, Michalowski said the office would lock down anything that could be vulnerable and resolve the issue. Quote, we've been very successful in blocking third-party interference, Michalowski said.
Trust us. I can't show you any of that data, but trust us.
Voters concerned about election integrity can also participate as a poll watcher. Poll watchers can observe the conduct of the election in a polling place, including by visually comparing voters' signatures against their registration. Citizens can also serve as an election judge during early voting or on election day. Michalowski encouraged young voters to get involved with elections and help foster democracy by working in these roles. Interested parties can find more information at cookcountyclerkil.gov. The public can also observe election recounts and testing of election equipment at the clerk's elections operations centers, and anyone
except when we put up blocking instrument or cardboard to make sure you can't see it.
And
Like
anyone can file election complaints with the clerk's office or seek public election information through Freedom of Information Act requests.
And here's where we send the complaints. Right to the shredder.
What are the voter qualifications that prevent illegal voting? Illinois requires identification to register to vote.
Register.
Right. To register to vote in Illinois, an individual must be a United States citizen, 18 years old by the general election date, and a resident of Illinois for at least 30 days prior to the election. They also must submit 2 forms of identification. Those identifications do not have to be a photo ID, but one must include the voter's current address, Michalowski said. Some examples include a driver's license, a state ID card, a student ID, a credit card, a social security card, a utility bill, or a birth certificate. Okay, so we already knew this because it's 18 versus 21. Mm-hmm. Harder to order a drink at a bar or easier to vote than get into a bar.
Of course.
Easily, like not even close.
Which again, if you take it as the sacrament that they do or the ritual that they do, and they believe this is not just performative, right? Then they're not really what am I getting at? They're clear. If all of this is so, the processes are so sanctified and held up to be of the greatest value, and yet doing and exerting the basic minimum of effort in order to do it, it really means that it's designed for fraud, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't hold up something to be of such value and take such little care in assuring its authenticity unless the inauthenticity of the vote is what the goal is.
Yes. Where were we? On election day, a voter must provide their signature to confirm their identity. It's a good idea for voters to update their signature at their polling place ahead of time to ensure there's no confusion with their ballot.
What? So I can just, oh
Yeah,
wait,
let me
that's
go
not my
in.
signature. Let me give you my new signature.
When a person
And look,
when a
my
person
new signature happens to be identical to the one I'm going to sign right now. The old one, I don't know where that came from.
when a person dies, the clerk's office removes them from the list of registered voters. They do this by cross-referencing the voter database against government death records or through family members contacting the office.
We all know how accurate those rolls are.
How can voters trust mail ballots? When when a voter applies for a mail ballot, the clerk's office verifies their information through registration records before mailing the ballot. When a voter receives it, the ballot must be signed on the exterior of the envelope before being mailed back or dropped off. That signature is then verified by 3 bipartisan judges through registration records. These judges are trained in signature verification. If a signature is completely different, Michalowski said, the judges will ask for further identification.
How do they do that?
Mail ballots can be dropped off at more than 50 early voting sites in Cook County. A licensed and bonded carrier service picks up and delivers the ballots each day. The courier and an election judge at each location must agree on the number of ballots each day and place them in a sealed envelope for transport.
And of course, all of this is recorded in paper for posterity. And for the 2020 election results, all the ballots were transported to a warehouse. You could check this out in Bartlett, Illinois. And when people went to try to investigate and look at the different ballots that had been placed, or I don't even know if this was just the Illinois vote. I think it was the national vote, to tell you the truth. Of course, you could look this up. That warehouse burned down. It's just ash now. I'm not kidding. This is not a joke. Did you know that?
I gotta look that up. No.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
I gotta look into that. Mail ballots can, oh, I said that voters can track their mail ballot. It's interesting how they don't say mail-in ballots anymore. It's just mail ballots.
Right.
What's up with
Yeah.
that?
I don't know. Well, they want to normalize it as much as possible, right?
Voters can track their mail ballot to ensure it was counted through the clerk's office. If a voter sees their ballot was not received or authenticated, there's time to cure that ahead of time and produce any necessary identification. Here we go. Quote, our democracy depends on us, Michalowski said. It's an honor to serve the citizens of Cook County.
No, that's it. It's such an honor.
Do we want to talk about this? Yeah. Last one. OP trustees approved new loan forgiveness policy. As of December 31st, 2023, the village had more than $4.1 million in outstanding loans. In a move for transparency and clarity around the community development and housing loan processes, Oak Park's Village Board approved a new policy to address requests to defer or forgive loans. The village administers community development or housing loans, both to nonprofit organizations who provide community development, housing development, or housing rehabilitation services, and to individual homeowners in Oak Park looking to purchase or improve a policy. The new policy is intended to help support more low to moderate income households. Some funding for the loans comes from Community Development Block Grant and U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development dollars, Village President Vicky Skaman said, which are intended to make a difference in those communities. But the loans come from the village's Community Development Loan Fund or the Affordable Housing Fund too. Quote, even a $10,000 loan can be a game changer for somebody, Skaman said. Trustees all voted to approve the new policy, apart from trustee Corey Wesley, who rescued himself from this discussion because he said he has a related loan out on his house. Oh, recused himself. Rescued. I said as of December 30, he did rescue himself. As of December 31st, 2023, the village had 106 outstanding loans amounting to more than $4.1 million. A lot are small value loans for homeowners, but 13 of the loans totaling more than 2.6 million are for the Oak Park Residence Corporation and Oak Park Housing Authority, whatever those are. Both the OPRC and OPHHA have requested loans be deferred or forgiven, which the board has typically approved. The new policy outlines that both nonprofit organizations and individual homeowners can be eligible for loan forgiveness. When considering a loan forgiveness request, village staff members say they will consider several factors, including the amount of the loan, outstanding loans, impact on housing programs, financial need, and past treatment. By approving this policy, Jonathan Birch, the village's neighborhood service director, said the board is clarifying where the threshold is for loan forgiveness requests. Quote, we had not necessarily established what's the bar made of or how high it is or any of the other criteria, he said. There you go. That's a great quote. This is getting kind of boring.
Good.
Quote, it really creates a level of equity, I think, that seems like it was not already part of the process. Trustee Lucia Robinson said, it's a process that applies across the board and one that's transparent. But Robinson also said she'd like the policy guidelines to be stricter, potentially with a dollar amount threshold for forgiveness allowed. There shouldn't be a, quote, revolving door of applicants requesting loans and having them forgiven, she said. If a loan is extended, the expectation should be that it will be paid back, she pointed out, but said she wants to benefit as many residents as possible. Have you seen the movie The Big Short? You've seen the movie The Big Short?
Yeah.
This is the part where you go back and you short everything. You short all of the housing loans right now.
Yeah.
If Oak Park's just forgiving them.
Correct. Well, they're not really forgiven.
Yeah, right.
Some Fed funds program is going to pick them up.
Right. Oh, gosh. If this loan forgiveness option can then help residents remain in this community, can help reduce their cost burden of living in this community, those kinds of things would weigh very heavily for me, Robinson said.
How about
what about property tax?
Yeah, take the property taxes down, you jerk.
Trustee Robbie Paracott suggested instead of forgiving loans regularly, the village provide grants.
Come on, Robbie.
Village manager Kevin Jackson said, while it is more complex, deferring and forgiving loans rather than providing grants creates incentives for long-term commitment to advance affordable housing goals. Trustee Brian Strauss said he wants to ensure it's equally straightforward for homeowners and nonprofit organizations to apply with simple, accessible forms. It should be harder for organizations, however, to receive loan forgiveness than individuals or families, he said. Quote, there shouldn't be something where you can only apply for forgiveness if you're a nonprofit that starts with Oak Park, Strauss said. And I think that is historically how this is operated. A lot of I thinking going on.
Yeah.
In this one.
They don't know. They don't know what they're doing.
Anyways, that's the segment. The people segment.
That's it.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
What would have happened if I'd gone for it and just said, no, I'm gay. Good episode. I am excited for more beer.
Yeah, for sure.
Soon.
I know. Can't wait. So,
I can't believe it's real. I knew that it was eventually going to happen, but when I walk into a store in Illinois, that's not too far of a drive, and I said, I'll have a 6-pack, and yeah, I'll show you my ID. Cristeros. And I'm going to talk up with the cashier. Have you had these? Are you guys, you still have these in stock? I'm going to say.
Yeah, you shouldn't. I can't believe it.
I can't wait. I'll probably just run into Benny's with one too, just to be like, yo.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. This is actually more than a beer. This is a cultural shift. This is the next crusade.
Oh,
by the way. It's not, the next crusade won't be fought with swords and shields.
Yeah, Pornhub is run by a rabbi, but the new
Yeah.
the beer revolution's coming and it's Catholic.
Right.
Yeah. Amen. Okay. Well, until next time, Charlie, huh?
Yeah. Looking
God
forward to
bless
it.
everyone.
All
Peace.
right. Peace.